What is anti-Black theology? Denouncing Black fraternities and sororities on theological grounds often reflects an anti-Black theological framework, one that misinterprets Christian doctrine to delegitimize Black cultural. Anti-Black theology is a belief system, often unconscious, that interprets Christian teachings in ways that marginalize or pathologize Black identity, culture, and resistance. It tends to prioritize individual salvation over collective liberation, frame Black cultural expressions as idolatrous or unbiblical, ignore the historical role of Black institutions in fighting oppression. Brain how this shows up in denouncements of BGLOs. Recent public renouncements of Black Greek letter organizations, BGLOs, like Delta Sigma Theta and Alpha Phi Alpha often cite concerns about rituals, oaths, and perceived idolatry. For example, Zora Maybell Sanders, a Howard University student, denounced her sorority membership, claiming the rituals conflicted with her Christian beliefs. But this critique often lacks historical and cultural context. 1. Erasure of resistance. BGLOs were founded in the early 20th century as a response to racial exclusion from white fraternities. They became hubs for civil rights activism, leadership development, and community service. Denouncing them without acknowledging this legacy erases their role in Black liberation. 2. Misreading of ritual and symbolism. Critics often equate BGLO rituals with paganism or idolatry. Yet many rituals are symbolic affirmations of unity, scholarship, and service, not worship. This reflects a Eurocentric lens that fails to understand African diasporic traditions of communal bonding and spiritual expression. 3. Theological double standards. White Christian organizations often use rituals, creeds, and symbols, yet rarely face accusations of idolatry. Targeting BGLOs suggests a racialized application of theology, where Black expressions of faith and culture are deemed suspect. The Black Church's response. Many Black pastors and theologians argue that Christianity must be contextualized within Black history and struggle. They affirm that BGLOs can coexist with faith when rooted in service, justice, and integrity. As one article put it, what may be of God to you may not resonate with another, a reminder that faith journeys are personal, but must also be culturally aware. Black liberation theology directly counters critiques of Black fraternities and sororities by affirming Black cultural identity, resisting theological racism, and reframing ritual and community as sacred tools of survival and empowerment. Here's how it does so. Black liberation theology, a direct response to BGLO critiques. 1. Affirming Black identity as sacred. James Cone, the father of Black liberation theology, argued that God is Black, in the sense that God identifies with the oppressed. Cone's theology insists that Blackness is not a spiritual liability, but a divine location of truth, dignity, and resistance. Critiques that label BGLOs as idolatrous or unchristian often stem from white-centered theological frameworks that fail to recognize the sacredness of Black cultural expression. 2. Reframing ritual as resistance. BGLO rituals, chants, oaths, and ceremonies are often misread as pagan or incompatible with Christianity. Black liberation theology reframes these practices as communal acts of survival, rooted in African diasporic traditions of bonding, memory, and moral formation. Cone and theologians like Juan Floyd Thomas argue that these rituals are not worship but symbolic affirmations of justice, unity, and purpose. 3. Rejecting theological racism. Black liberation theology critiques white Christianity for its history of excluding Black voices and pathologizing Black institutions. It exposes how theological critiques of BGLOs often ignore the racist exclusion that led to their formation in the first place. Cone wrote that any theology that is indifferent to the theme of liberation is not Christian theology, meaning that faith must be accountable to the lived realities of Black people. 4. Centering collective liberation over individual piety. Critics often frame BGLO participation as a threat to individual salvation. Black liberation theology shifts the focus to collective liberation, arguing that salvation is not just personal but social. It calls Christians to engage in structural transformation, not just moral policing. Why anti-Black theology finds a home on YouTube. 1. Algorithmic amplification of controversy. YouTube's algorithm favors emotionally charged, polarizing content that drives engagement. Videos denouncing Black sororities, liberation theology, or gospel music often use clickbait titles like, "Why I Left Delta Sigma Theta for Jesus" or "The Truth About Black Church Idolatry." These narratives provoke debate, boosting views and visibility, even if the theology is shallow or harmful. 2. Low theological literacy among viewers. Many viewers lack formal theological training, making them vulnerable to simplistic, literalist interpretations of Scripture. Creators often weaponize verses, e.g., against idolatry or worldliness, without historical or cultural context. This leads to racialized readings of faith, where Black cultural practices are pathologized while white Christian traditions go unquestioned. 3. Rise of ex-evangelical and deliverance testimony culture. Testimony videos, where people renounce past affiliations, are popular in evangelical circles. When Black creators denounce BGLOs or hip-hop culture, it's framed as spiritual deliverance, reinforcing the idea that Blackness must be purified to be Christian. These testimonies often reflect internalized anti-Blackness, shaped by theological environments that equate whiteness with holiness. 4. Lack of counter-narratives. Womanist and liberation theologians rarely dominate YouTube's religious space. Their work is often published in academic or church-based settings, not optimized for viral video culture. This leaves a vacuum where anti-Black theology goes unchallenged, especially among younger audiences seeking spiritual guidance online. 5. Cultural policing in the name of faith. Many creators use theology to police Black joy, ritual, and resistance, labeling them as distractions from true Christianity. This reflects a broader trend of Christian gatekeeping, where Black expressions of faith are deemed suspect unless they conform to white evangelical norms. Weaponizing Scripture without context. When creators cite verses like, "You shall have no other gods before me," Exodus 20 verse 3, or, "Do not love the world or anything in the world," 1 John 2 verse 15, they often do so without historical context. These verses were written in specific cultural and political settings, ancient Israel and early Christian communities resisting empire. Without cultural nuance, they ignore how Black communities have used ritual, music, and communal bonds not to worship idols, but to survive and affirm dignity in the face of oppression. This leads to misapplication, where Black sorority rituals are called idolatrous. Gospel music is labeled worldly. African spiritual aesthetics are deemed demonic. Meanwhile, white Christian traditions, stained glass, creeds, liturgical robes, go unquestioned, even though they also involve ritual and symbolism. Racialized readings of faith. This double standard reflects a racialized theology, where Blackness is treated as spiritually suspect. Whiteness is treated as the default for holiness. For example, a Black woman's pledge to Delta Sigma Theta may be condemned as spiritual bondage. A white woman's pledge to a Christian sorority is celebrated as faithful sisterhood. This reveals how anti-Black theology isn't just about Scripture, it's about power. It uses religion to police Black identity, joy, and resistance. Womanist and liberation theology push back. Theologians like Dolores Williams and James Cone argue that God is on the side of the oppressed. Black cultural expression is not a threat to faith, it's a testimony of survival. They call us to read Scripture through the lens of justice, not control.